Order the joint Troy City Council and Planning Commission special meeting for Monday, October 12th, 2015. And if we could have the roll call. Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Slater?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Campbell?
Here.
Councilmember Gottlieb?
Here.
Councilmember Henderson?
Here.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Here.
Councilmember Pennington?
Here.
Councilmember Teets?
Here.
Chairman Edmonds?
Here.
Mr. Apathidian?
Here.
Mrs. Cruz?
Here.
Mr. Hazan?
Here.
Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Krent?
Here.
Mrs. Kupa?
Here.
Mr. Sanzika? Mr. Tagle?
Here.
Ms. Burko?
Great, another good turnout for these meetings that Don and I feel are so important to have communication between the Planning Commission and the City Council. We have two items on our agenda for discussion this evening. The first is a community development planning update with a presentation by Brian Kishnick, our city manager. And before I call on Brian, I just the purpose of these meetings are so that we can have some good dialogue between the Planning Commission and Council. And one of the things that I've heard over the years is that sometimes the Planning Commission isn't quite clear what the Council is looking for and asking the Planning Commission to do. So I think that's why it's so important to have these joint meetings so that we can have a dialogue. And when we walk away from here, hopefully we all come away with the reasons why Troy is such a great place and how it will be in the future. So with that, I will call on City Manager Brian Kishnick. Good evening, Brian.
Good evening. Thanks, Mayor and Planning Commission and Planning Commissioners. Since somebody's there, what we're going to do tonight, as the Mayor said, this is a result of the last time you all got together and the opportunity to have more of these meetings for dialogue and relationships. But we wanted this one to be more of a no agenda meeting, and I know that may be difficult for people to maybe wrap their heads around, but it really is a, let's just get together and let's talk. But we couldn't do that without some level of presentation. And of course, the master plan is an important document in the city and that you all are doing the heavy lifting on. So we wanted to start with Brent giving a master plan update quickly, and then myself, I'll kind of set the stage for a little bit of the discussion just to get you thinking, and then have everyone else, you all lead the discussion from there. So Brent's going to do the first part, and he's got a riveting presentation on the master plan. So
thank you, Brian. And I've got a prop to spice up my presentation. This, I think you're all familiar with this document. This is the master plan from 2008. It was comprehensively updated in 2008. It was our first comprehensive update in almost 40 years. So significant effort. Now, not to get into the nitty-gritty of state law, but state law does require that at least every 5 years, once the community adopts a master plan, they've got to revisit it and determine if it's still valid. So I'll get more into that in a second. But first of all, this is a question that I've been asked to kind of address in a minute and a half. Why a master plan matters. It's a very important document. We discussed this today in a meeting. It's either the second or third most important document in the city of Troy. Why? Because it lays out the land use and development policy for the city. And why that's important is the master plan is the policy document for the city. The zoning ordinance is the law. And the zoning ordinance by law must be based on the policy of the master plan. So it's very important. Why it matters, the master plan doesn't affect residents directly until it affects residents directly. Example, we've all been involved in conditional rezonings or straight rezonings where there's a development that's proposed for, say it's a commercial development and it's in close proximity to residential development. The first thing that staff does, Planning Commission considers, City Council considers, is whether it's compliant, consistent with the master plan. So that it helps us make difficult decisions. And when you make difficult decisions based on zoning, it must be based on the plan. So, very important. So, when we revisited the plan in 2013 as required by law, we found that it was in really good shape. It just needed some minor tweaking. So this is a list of where we're focusing our update efforts, starting in 2013 moving forward. We decided we needed to expand housing opportunities in the city based on demographics. This is not only for the young residents who are going to enter the workforce out of university, but also empty nesters and seniors. There's a demand in the marketplace, and we wanted to look at that. We wanted to fill empty buildings in North Troy. There's a lot of vacant spaces up there. We wanted to come up with an approach that was going to help to make that more of a relevant area. We wanted to strengthen both Rochester Road and Maple Road. We want to continue our efforts in developing Big Beaver as a world-class corridor. And for the geographic areas, we've come up with draft language for each of them, including strategies and how to implement the recommendations moving forward. And while all this is going on, we still have to strike that balance and protect single-family residential neighborhoods. It's one of the strengths of the city of Troy. We can't lose fact of that balance. In September, we had our last joint meeting, and our planning consultant showed you this timeline. It has not changed. So our next milestone is presenting a complete draft of the document to the Planning Commission in October. So we plan to do that fourth Tuesday of this month. You'll see, the Planning Commission will see the first complete draft. In November, we're proposed to have a joint meeting of Planning Commission and City Council to discuss the draft. We're earmarking that date as November 23rd. And there's some process here that's required by state law, including a 63-day waiting period. I'm not going to get too much into this, but the deliverable for getting approval of the plan, March of 2016. So that's all you ever want to know about the master plan, importance of the master plan and the process in 2 minutes. And with that being said, now I'm going to introduce Brian, who's going to, I've kind of laid the framework here. So he's going to continue talking about the master plan, but that frames the discussion for opening up dialogue between Planning Commission and City Council moving forward.
Thanks, Brent. So I'm not really going to talk about the master plan, because what I do is I talk to all kinds of groups, right? All the two parties, the League of Women Voters, the homeowners associations, the various ones. Some I talk to, some I don't. Due to invite and the numbers that they get out, but the President's Association, which is a really good thing to have. And the number one thing they all ask me about is the master plan. They want to know, how's the master plan coming, right? No. Nobody asks about it. Nobody. So when Brent goes and he talks about, when I said, talk about Bill Smith on whatever road, why does he care, she care? Why do the people in the community even care about the master plan, like he said, until it affects them? But what we try to do is get the groups together, whether it was the movers and shakers, or were they movers and shakers or boomers and shakers?
Boomers and shakers.
And they were residential people, they were developers, right? So there are all these things, people, and these groups, and high school students who were it was a great group, and they give all their input, and then they walk out of there, what do you think they're saying to themselves? Geez, I can't wait to read that document that they put together, right? So, and that's okay, because what's sort of the idea of today is community engagement, right? We want to engage the community. That part is what we just talked about. So not to make light of this, what I'm saying is now it's time for all of us to do the heavy lifting and actually go through the thing and have the thoughts in the master plan and the policy document that shows us that we're working toward doing the things and making it real to the people out in the community. And that's what we're talking about. So when we talked about internal people, internal groups within the community. When you talk to external people from whatever, Lake Orion, Clarkston, Novi, Alpena, what do you think they say about the city of Troy? A group, the answer's on the board.
Yeah.
All right. So they say good schools, they say Somerset, they say safest city, they say all these things, but in a nutshell, it's the American dream. It's the American city. Everyone, the diversity of the city, your kids are going to be ahead of 90% of the kids across the state when they go to university or VOTEC or whatever they might do, you know your kids are gonna have a great opportunity. Because Troy is like the American dream. Now, we're not talking white picket fences, but we're talking about all the qualities that make it up. And so then we do this master plan, and there's this is just me talking, there seems to be this disconnect. And so that's what we're trying to talk about tonight, or at least I'm trying to lead into, is what do we do with this disconnect, and how do we make it real and establish policies and strategies that say, here's what we're focusing on, and here's what we're going to do. The zoning ordinance obviously follows, but as was said at a different meeting, economic development is a key part of that also. So here's a development where we are. So this is what works. Would you all agree? This is what works. Few people don't think that works, but it could be worse. So anyway,
Where's that at?
this is an architectural firm. Can you help me, John? What would it say? A plus Link or whatever architecture firm? Anyway, I don't want to take.
Nobody else would name one architectural firm.
Huh? And all the rest.
No, it doesn't.
It's just those. So anyways, it could be worse, right? So a couple of examples. So how do we make sure that it's working? So a development, kind of where we are. Everybody knows this picture. Everybody knows this project. It's not Tucker Street, but it certainly is a project that got a lot of attention, right? But it could be better. So how do we get to that? And John, think, well, what do we do? Design standards, this. In our master plan process, isn't this some of the things we should be talking about? Even outside the master plan, what should we be talking? And where are the opportunities? There's a few opportunities, and I'm not listing a bunch of them. I'm just going to give a few examples to get you thinking. Here's Civic Center. Not to spend a lot of time, but this is the south side of Town Center, and then this is the entire Civic Center property. That's been talked about for a long time. Maybe not this, but in terms of what's the development potential that maybe isn't extremely intensive and kind of contradictory to the area and the residentials up here across the street. But what are we doing? See right here, I look at that and I say, wow, there is a portfolio, right, that's going out. Somebody's sending a portfolio out to people to try to do something here. And then this is Civic Center Drive, or Civic Center property that's been talked about as well. It's just one little opportunity that we need to be thinking of, among others. And then Big Beaver, and this isn't I'll talk about both ends. Big Beaver from I-75 to Adams is that golden corridor, right, that has Somerset and all the high value of the Bank of America. What are we doing? What kind of policies and strategies are we thinking of to keep that golden corridor, that value, and the standards that are associated with that in the past? What are we doing to continue that, right? Instead of just taking development for development's sake, what are we doing to keep that high level of quality, which, by the way, Troy is very well known for across the state, professionalism and high quality. And then the other end is when you go from 75 down to what, I would say John R., you've got Automation Alley, the major economic development engine going through across the world and bringing in people. And even though they might go to Detroit, even though they might go somewhere in another Genesee County, they do come through Troy, right, to see the Big Beaver corridor. And not to mention Troy Sports Center and Dennis Bostic and those guys who bring in millions of people a year and fill up the hotels and the restaurants and all this. So what are we doing to encourage that, right, while we're protecting neighborhoods? So that's our presentation, just to get you thinking. This is just an open forum for you guys to talk, Mayor and Planning Commission Chair Edmonds. But we wanted to at least give you 6.5 minutes of thoughts. So, back to you.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you, Brian. I really haven't talked to Don a whole lot about the format that we're going to use tonight, but what seems to work in these roundtables is not to be real structured and to let people talk, and maybe the planning commission might have questions for council, and council might have questions for planning people. But it doesn't have to be very formal. I think it's best that we stay informal and we have a discussion. And I think what Brian tries to do this evening is just set something in motion to talk about, and that's the master plan. And I think that would be a great thing for us to start talking about tonight. And I'll just kind of lead this thing off, and then we can jump, and maybe Don can speak after I do. But I think something that I'm seeing happen with the master plan is that 7 years ago, they did a great job. First one done in 40 years, and they did a fantastic job, knowing that we're going to have to tweak it as we move along. And then we went into a recession almost immediately after that, which changed a lot of what was going on in Troy, because it was very hard to attract anybody to do anything. We were just trying to survive, quite honestly. And then I saw Troy maybe be almost the first city to start coming out of it. And I think I wish 3 years ago we would have had the foresight to do something then, to maybe be more restrictive on Big Beaver and try to encourage more density, a little bit taller buildings. And one thing that you can't do is you can't, if somebody comes in and wants to do something, make a decision then that, oh no, we're gonna stop them from doing that, because as we know, legally you can't do that. You almost have to be proactive. And so in some of the discussions that we had today, earlier, I think we need to be more proactive now. We need to not be doing this every 5 years. We need to be doing this more often. City staff has to be more involved, and the planning commission has to be the catalyst, in my opinion. And right now is a perfect time, I think, to revisit Big Beaver, revisit Maple, revisit a lot of these areas. We're trying to, we put MJR down in Maple and Livernois, and we're trying to encourage redevelopment on the corner, but we really haven't done anything to encourage that or to make some changes. So this is a perfect opportunity, I think. And once this is done, I think we just need to be doing this more often. We need to be talking more, and we need to let Big Beaver become a single-story, flat Big Beaver. So that's my initial thought. I think we need to start talking about what we want to do in the city. I look at, Brian, if we could put the map back up there just for a second. This map here, I think needs a lot of discussion and a lot of thought. And I've told everybody that what tipped me over to Amber Apartments on the corner was the hopes that this entire area here would become kind of the Big Beaver corridor. And that was my initial thought, and I think a lot of council members, that was the same thinking. So, Don, I'll let you just say a couple things, and then I think we just need to have some discussions here. Ask some questions and respect other people's opinions. Give everybody an opportunity to speak if we could, but it doesn't have to be so formal.
Thank you, Mayor. 5 of the current city planning commissioners attended the recent Michigan, the MAP conference, the Michigan Association of Planning. And I've been to several of these in the past, but I thought this was one of the more outstanding state conferences. The sessions had lots of applicability to Troy, even though they were held in the city of Detroit. There were several discussions and then several sessions that were right on point, and I did ask Brent to email some thought starters to all the planning commission members this afternoon, and I know you've all received those. But there, I would agree with you. I think we got to have a little more fire in the belly, so to speak. Let's get going. Let's do some things that are great rather than just good. So I'll just open it up to the planning commission members if they'd like to kick it off. Yes?
Mr. Edmonds, Mayor, you hit a real hot button on the planning commission when you talked about the Big Beaver corridor and single stories. We have been vexed for years because it was optional that you could go up to a second story. We were hoping for some mixed uses. I can't tell you, I mean, 3 or 4 developments came in and we could not convince them to go that second story. They just said it was economically unfeasible. And my comment at that time was, well, if we had a limitation on that, fine, but I hate to see us go into single-story strip walls along Big Beaver, and that's got the potential for that happening. I think that one of the things this master plan is going to do is revisit that zoning in that particular area of Big Beaver and make it mandatory for a building at least 2 stories.
Yes, I agree, particularly the area west of 75.
Yes.
Yeah. Ms. Cooper?
Several years ago, we had a Troy Futures process. Many of us served on it. Does that inform the master plan in any way? And how is that related to the master plan? Because I don't know. I mean, we all created reports about our different committees, but is that something that we can make sure that that happens? That's one question. My second question is, we did approach these different demographic groups, the boomers and shakers, the high school students. What about the groups that don't come forward? How do we get, because we know that there's a lot of people in the community that represent certain demographics that aren't coming forward, and that they are buying houses by the droves in Troy. And how do we make sure that they also participate in this? Because they are buying houses with the intent to stay here and put their children through the school district. And have you involved the school district in some of that discussion? So, okay, you're done.
Thank you.
Brian, I don't know if somebody can speak about the futures. You know, that's kind of what's going on today, I think. You know, we're getting input from different people, different groups, and that certainly, I believe, was something that, John, you might even be able to talk about that, because that's very important in forming the master plan, futures, and then 2009 happened too, you know, which, I don't know, Brent or?
Yeah, no, if John wants to go.
Well, we definitely took all of those reports under consideration when we were developing the plan. We also had forums where we invited people to come. Some were better attended than others, but I don't know how you get the horse to drink the water. I mean, you can lead them in the pool, but they don't want to, I don't know. I think it was said earlier, they're not interested until it affects them.
I think Brian might have some input on that too, because we're seeing that now. He's trying to reach out to everyone, and I think we're doing a great job, but John makes a valid point. I mean, you can only do so much. I think a lot of the people that are moving into Troy are moving in for the schools, which is very important to them. Maybe not so much the Big Beaver corridor. You know, everybody has an important reason why they moved into Troy. Not all of it's because of office and the mall. A lot of people, the realtors, can say it's about the schools. That's what they care about.
So Mayor, what I'm looking at here is, if you just, I always want to take this down, it's been out there for years, but when you just look at the pictures, which is why we took the pictures, the cultural diversity is pretty impressive out here. And this is what we did. And now, I'm not saying it's outstanding, I'm not saying it's something that, you know, is a 10 out of 10, but it's, when you look at who was involved, it was pretty good. When you look at the President's Association, you know, that Sunil operates, it's how we're trying to reach out to different groups. And we'll continue to do that, whether it's through the Financial Ideas team, whether it's through appointments to boards. If focus groups, you know, I just don't know. I don't know. Seniors certainly come out in large amounts, and Trails and Pathways people come out. in large amounts. But other than that, it's pretty difficult. In terms of the focus, was it 2020 or was it, I've been involved in so many of those focus 20-somethings. We did compile all those documents about 2.5 years ago and did a presentation. And so then we've lifted off from there into what we're trying to do is not make, like I said before, not have people come together and leave with their input on the table and say, geez, what's ever going to become of that? And I can't wait to read that document that it's going to sit on a shelf. So we try to have more meaningful input and more diversity at the table. That'd be my answer.
Mr. Grant?
We're looking for answers for vision from the community. Obviously, that's the source of all our vision. But what I see serving on the Planning Commission, and I'm sure the council people have the same thing, you get an agenda, your meeting's focused on the agenda items. Once a year, you have a maybe visionary meeting. But what I'm thinking is we, as both bodies, should be the visionaries and spend a lot more time developing a bigger vision than we are today. And just right off what Don said, the last MAP, that's the Michigan Association of Planners Convention, was an inspiration. I attended the one in Atlanta in 2014, that's the national convention, and you look around the country, what other people are doing, it just inspires you like you can't believe. It makes me feel like we're just kind of sitting treading water. So if we could, as two bodies, maybe get some of that vision from other cities that are really doing great stuff and attracting great energy. Maybe at some point we could have not just the planning commissioners go to these conventions, but also city council to see the vision of other people across the country.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And when we were doing the move across Troy, we brought the consultant in from Chicago and told us he hasn't seen anything like this anywhere in the country. We need to embrace that. We need to bring more experts in here, tell us what we can do and what we should do. In my opinion, we should be bringing to a joint meeting experts to tell us this works here. You might want to look at this in your visions. But I think today, what I think the Planning Commission needs to hear is from city council members. Because what we don't want to have happen is the Planning Commission go and put together a master plan, have it come to us, and we say, oh, no, that's not what we were talking about. Now's the time for us, from the city council standpoint, to tell the Planning Commission what some of our vision is, what are we looking for, so that they don't do all this work and it comes back to us for approval and we say no. So, no.
Just a question with regard to that. It's just, we saw the calendar look like we're going to see a draft of the master plan from the Planning Commission relatively soon. It's going to go to the council relatively soon and then get approved relatively soon after that. Does that plan that we're going to see incorporate these kind of visionary ideas and the coordination between the Planning Commission and the council that you're talking about today?
Yeah, and that's why we're here today, because there wasn't any set direction that we're supposed to give to management today. I think they're anxiously waiting to hear what we jointly have to say so that they can put something together. I've talked about the Big Beaver corridor. We've talked about changing the ordinance. I think we need to do something else, and I think Karen has some good ideas for that too.
Well, you're right. You just talked briefly about, the Big Beaver corridor and some of the need for the taller buildings and density and the outreach programs, and that's all very important and needs to be considered. But I think personally that we also need to focus on what's in our backyard. And our backyard is the Civic Center and Town Center. And we have a lovely opportunity, in my opinion, to develop that whole Civic Center area into something that is world-class, something that draws everyone from Troy to the Town Center, if you will. There could be something there for all ages, all ethnic groups, something that would appeal literally to everyone, and it connects to the Big Beaver corridor. You start at Livernois in Town Center and you make it interesting enough, and people take the next step forward and the next step forward, and before you know it, you're on Big Beaver. Or maybe you take a step backward and now you're at the dog park, and then you're at Walsh College, and now you're at the Historical Museum. But you have the opportunity with your pathways and with the proximity of what's already in place to create a connection and a cohesiveness in a way that benefits everyone in the city. Now, we've just approved through the Planning Commission this PUD development that's going to go in across the street. And that would be the first place that I would start looking to sort of develop some of these other areas. Let's bring in the private dollars, let's work with them, and then throw some money at the library. The library, on a good day, is underwhelming. And we want to bring people into the library. It's an important part of a community. So I just think that we are sitting on untapped resources. And, you know, like you said, you bring in a few experts or start collaborating with some ideas. And Steve, I know when you were on Planning Commission, you had some funding ideas. I think we talked about how in Grand Rapids they have art design contests, and there's just all kinds of things that we could do if we just put our heads together to really make the Civic Center and Town Center area a fabulous connection to the Big Beaver corridor.
Thank you.
John?
Yeah, my thoughts here really piggyback on a lot of what's been said, but I think we need to step back and look a little bit bigger in our vision. As Mike pointed out, we sit and listen to developers come in and say they can't do this, it's not economically feasible, or this is the housing stock, it sells the best. We have a great opportunity right now, not only for what Karen just said, but if you go down a few miles, there's a heck of a development being built at Woodward for the Red Wings and what that's going to do. I just heard on the radio, there are companies coming in to start looking at what's happening down there. I think we need to have a marketing strategy to go outside this region and to talk to developers or others that would be interested in coming and seeing what we have to offer here. I think what we're hearing from the local people is more of the same old stuff. And I think all it will take is a single project, a viable single project, and others will start to look and say, okay, the process has started. So I think we need to look a little bit bigger than our periphery of our community here and go outside of that with a very strategic message.
Yeah, you guys are saying everything that I believe. And once again, not to go back, but that was my reason for Amber. Allowing that to happen was in the hope of doing more in the Civic Center area, turning that in. There's the Children's Hospital. There's going to be people working there. The park is going to happen. It looks like it's all going to happen. We didn't make the Big Beaver corridor extend on the east side of Livernois from Big Beaver up 7 years ago because we didn't want to infringe on the neighborhoods, which was a real good reason. But now we're talking about doing exactly what we didn't want to do now by extending the Big Beaver corridor, putting a PUD there, putting a park there. If it was, 7 years ago, if it was Big Beaver corridor, we wouldn't even be sitting here having a discussion. It would be a done deal. So things change. Things change in 7 years. Things change in a year, 2 years. We just need to, as Karen said and as John said, I think we need to be looking at a bigger picture today than we ever have before. And I think we need to stop what's going on Big Beaver right now. I think we need a moratorium until we make a decision here on what we want to do, finally.
If I could just add to your thought, the conference that a couple of these guys were talking about, Fenton was there telling us how they turn things around in their community. And one of the underlying points that the city manager made was that city council, planning commission, staff were all on the same page, and were all proactive as this is what we want in our community. And they weren't afraid to say no if it wasn't fitting what these bodies agreed to the direction they agreed to go in. And I think, these kinds of discussions are important, and it'll take a lot more, because there'll be a lot more of the detail stuff that we'll get into that, we'll have to talk about and discuss. But that was a very clear message from the folks at Fenton, and it's happening. And now people are developers are wanting to come in. There's no more incentives that the city is giving out to have someone come in and develop. Those are done now. They've got the groundwork, and developers are coming in.
And I think, and I don't want to monopolize the city council, I wish we could get some more, but I think what happens sometimes, and what's great about these discussions is council members, might be the first time they're hearing some dialogue from the planning commission, maybe didn't even have any idea that a lot of this thought was going on. And to Carlton's point, this master plan can be done, but it doesn't mean that we can't tweak it along the way. And we can make a decision on doing it, and we could change that anytime we wanted to. So I look at more as an evolving process now, and I think we need to do it absolutely more than every 5 years. We need to do it every 6 months or wherever there might be a need, to do that. Mayor Pro Tem Campbell.
Yeah, I agree. What you guys have done with bringing the buildings closer to Big Beaver, excellent job. Man, it looks great. But to Mr. Hudson, you're right. It's getting to be a strip mall all up now, and it's nice to see new buildings, but these are, everything's a fast food, and it's really getting to be a little bit ridiculous. So I agree we should change them. What I want to ask Tom something. About 4 years ago, remember we had a book from a Troy High student who he's graduated now. I'm sure he's running a company someplace. And he had a plan to take the Civic Center and redevelop it into a downtown for Troy. And it was pretty phenomenal for a kid.
Absolutely was.
I mean, unbelievable. And I'm not quite sure whatever happened to that. I mean, obviously.
Yes, I've got a copy.
Did they ever see it?
I'm sure it's sitting on a shelf someplace in the city, too.
It was pretty slick idea, and he had a lot of good ideas. And some of it we probably would never do, but a lot of it was very, very well thought out.
And bouncing on the students, we had the Lawrence Technological University provide 4 different plans for Maple. Excellent project. All of them had great points. And if I may just hog a little more time, when I was in Atlanta at this National Planning Commission conference, they showed where a graduate student project it's a city inside of Atlanta. It used to be a steel factory. I don't want to go into a lot of detail here because I know our time's limited, but the point is that student's ideas were brought to a developer, and a developer turned it into a city inside of Atlanta. So a lot of times a student will spark something, and if a developer grabs hold and runs with it, wow, great things happen. And I have a presentation that I showed council, and if at some point, it showed the planning commission, if at some point the council, we could have a joint meeting, I could show you the kind of inspiration that I felt and saw down at Atlanta, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, those are also the type of things that we can give to the clerk or the staff, and they can distribute. And I think we need to do more of that. Trails and Pathways is a good example. I heard today that the Planning Commission really has no idea what's going on with the Trails and Pathways, and that's ridiculous. You're not involved in that, The DDA should be involved in our discussions about talking about the Golden Corridor. So communication, I think, is more important than ever right now, and we all need to talk about. And most of the people on the DDA are businessmen that have a stake in the Golden Corridor, and they should be at the table. They should be at the table. And believe me, they would love to see the corridor, maybe a moratorium on it right now, until we can put together a better plan. It was a great plan, but I think it's time to stop the plan. until we finalize, until we do something else.
What are the, go ahead, Sally.
We talk about the residential options that we need. We often hear about senior citizens wanting the ranch-style condos, and developers don't find that to be financially viable. I guess I'd like to encourage the creativity of, we have office buildings in the northern areas of Troy that you think, oh, it needs to be filled with office types, but could they be marketed to be converted to residential? Somebody like myself who's now an empty nester in some sort of new loft-like feel in some of those buildings. The building that comes to mind for me that I look at every time I exit I-75 is that Flagstar Bank. It's beautiful, and that's a combination of office and residential there. Could that be, is it a possibility that it could be residential? I mean, I guess I'd like to challenge us to be creative with our bikes and pathways, with our buildings, and they're doing it in Detroit, all over the place down there, taking buildings that were never intended to be housing and making it such. And to that point on marketing, where we sit in this region, as it continues to come back, wow, we're just in an amazing location. We need to be marketing that. If I was a developer, I'd want to be looking at Troy. And in addition to numerous cities in the area, but this is such a great spot, and Detroit is coming back, and there's a lot of creativity going on down there. We can bring it to the same American dream type community and have it fit here as well. Even when you're not raising children, you like to be in the American dream corner. So that kind of creativity to me is key, and I'm all for the moratorium. When you guys are making decisions and you find yourself tripping on that thing that just doesn't feel right and you're stuck saying yes, we need to know that. We need to be revisiting every 6 months so we know that that's happening. You should never have to say yes because our plan is no longer fitting.
If I may just piggyback on that, one of the takeaways from the conference, particularly like the demonstration city of Fenton, we always get the arguments from the developer, or they say, it's not financially viable to go multi-story on Big Beaver. Well, I think if we have a vision, we've got to incorporate that in that what I call the sweet spot of Big Beaver. Say, if you meet that criteria and you could get some multi-story development, then we've got to do it. But I think we've got to also, I know we go to people like, Carlton, Bank of America and one of the other banks, who say it's not mortgageable. The city of Fenton didn't take that for an answer. They wouldn't sit back for that. They had a vision and a goal, and within 2 years, they totally renovated their city. I think we've got to have a really active campaign to find a financial institution. They're doing it in Birmingham, ladies and gentlemen. How are they doing it? Are they much more valuable than we are? I don't think so. So I think that was the other thing. They wanted to make sure that you had a strategic marketing plan website only for this economic development. So.
Two things I wanted to mention. I've mentioned both these before with the council members before, but the first one is, I know we've talked a lot about the Golden Corridor. It's nice to talk about things that are gold, but I'd also like to remind the folks in this room that not everybody has the opportunity or has the means that they spend a lot of time in the Golden Corridor. And so some of those neighborhoods in our city that may not have homes that are worth $250,000 or less need the same attention. And just for the amount of time we spent talking about one, exclusive area, which is great, it's an important thing and a great thing about Troy, I would encourage us in the master plan to have some sort of focus on all parts of the city and from the top to bottom as far as the economic output. And then the other aspect is the Oakland Mall and having a plan for that neck of the woods, because again, it's great to talk about, man, we look really good, and then, but we ignore, gosh, Oakland Mall and the the problems down in that neck of the wood as far as how it's just has not taken off. And I would think that if a city is good enough to have a golden corridor, at least we can have other great parts. And I just really encourage you to, it's fun to talk about the great things that are going on in Big Beaver. And it's great to have that reputation. I just encourage you as you're putting together plans, and I'll be off city council, so you don't have to even do what I'm saying. You can ignore it completely if you want. But I just encourage you to think about those things as you're putting it together. So.
It's a great point, Doug. And earlier I mentioned MJR, what the intent was down there. We don't, there are other areas in town that certainly need attention to, and you know, that's why when we looked at, Brian, I don't know if you can get that up there, not to infringe on the residential areas. That should always be in our minds. Protect the neighborhoods, because we hear it when neighborhoods start to, you start talking about neighborhoods. They still need to be protected.
And to just tack on one last thing, to Pamela's point about diversity of input, I would contend that we get the least amount of diversity of input from people that live south of Big Beaver Road, like 0. And I know there's been a great deal of outreach by staff. That's no reflection. I mean, we just need to make that continual focus, to focus on things that are tough, then they get easier over time. So there's my final thought.
Yeah, one of the things that we buck with that is that almost all of those people who live in that area go to different schools, than Troy schools. So, you know, I think you have 4 different schools from Big Beaver to 14 Mile Road, and from DeQuinder to Adams. There might even be 5. So that's a challenge.
It's a challenge.
It's a challenge. But not that they're not any less important. David?
Just 2 things as we're talking. The Civic Center property, it was kind of an interesting schematic, but we sit in this room on probably one of the more valuable pieces of property in Oakland County. And what do we do here? We have meetings and, you know, conduct city business. And I know a former councilman who's moved down since had an idea of maybe moving City Hall somewhere else. And I think that needs to be at least talked about sometime in the future. So I don't know if that's practical, too costly, but again, this is a really valuable piece of property that so much can be done on. And secondly, we've had meetings on walkable Troy, and you know, trails and pathways is one thing, but we've talked about Big Beaver and how to make that walkable. And you know, I don't see the vision that some people see as feasible unless we get residential face forward on Big Beaver. And you know, we don't have to spend millions to create walkability, but if we were to encourage residential loft-style living, upward living along Big Beaver, walkability presents itself to us. We don't even have to really create it. So we should certainly encourage that. And I envision that along the Maple Corridor as well, you know, to tie in with some of the entertainment features.
Yeah, I think, to your point, Dave, I think Mr. Amber came to us just recently to talk about those small lofts that he's putting in down by Maple and Livernois, and they've done studies. They're not going to dump money into a project with the intent to lose money. So they said that that market is out there, and it needs more than Mr. Amber, you know. But he sees that vision, or he wouldn't be doing it. Ed?
That area will bring in young professionals, and that's what you need to infuse, you know, vitality into the region. And we talked about, Karen mentioned that Civic Center property. We did we had a retreat like 9 months ago that we all went to, and our group came up with an idea of a mixed-use area with making it a gem with like a landmark restaurant and multi-story. But you really can't do that, like Dave was saying, with this in that area, because it's a small area. I mean, I defer to John as an architect, but it's not a real big area to do anything with, you know, leaving this as a city hall without moving it like Dave was saying.
Well, I had I can share the email. I got an email from somebody from the county that said, right out front here with this vacant land between Big Beaver and City Hall, you could put a substantial couple towers in there that would fit very nicely as an entrance into the city hall. So there's ideas out there, and I don't think we should say no to anything at this point. I was here when the discussion was about selling this and going somewhere else, and studies were done back then, and it was just not economically feasible back then. Times changed, though. It would cost a lot of money to relocate City Hall, and I've been told that you'd never get that much money for this land to be able to do that. We should never say no, I don't think, ever. Anyone else? We have about 5 more minutes. No.
Karen mentioned about the library, and I think when you were talking about the building itself, it's such an active area, and the building belies everything that goes on there. It just doesn't even support it. Just that structure it's going to need attention, really big attention at some point. This building, having worked here, been a resident that used it, and now it's council, is inadequate to the needs of the community as well. If it is possible to move this in an economically feasible way, sell property and pay for that, we may be able to fix some of the problems we're having with these building structures. Maybe that's a crazy idea, but I think the point of these conversations is if we don't talk these things out and throw the ideas out, we'll never settle in what is feasible. And I would hope that anybody watching or hearing these discussions will treat them as the early creative discussions that they are. Sometimes when we get creative as leadership bodies in this city, I've observed it in the past, there will be an instant reaction negative. And I guess I'd like to make a plea to the members of the community who watch and pay attention to join us in thinking bigger and dreaming and scheming, because a master plan and visioning necessarily involves everybody kind of joining that process. And then, yeah, we'll wrestle down the snakes that are in that creativity, but we need to do this at this time, and we need the community to support us in these conversations that we need to continue to have. And I would just hope that people come forward with ideas. If you hear something you don't like, take a deep breath. It may be that it never even comes to fruition. And allow a very innovative community of people to be innovative. And I'm not referring to us at this table. I'm talking about this city. This is a very great city about locking arms and getting creative at doing great things. And sometimes we're our own worst enemy, though. And I hope we can continue to work together in this way to have those conversations.
And I think we need to revisit Rochester Road too when we're talking about the tweaking of the master plan. Something happened on Rochester Road that I don't think any of us would have thought would have happened. So, you have to always sometimes tweak things when somebody finds a little loophole or something too. So, I was just gonna call on Brian one more time before we close this up. Brian, you've heard some discussions tonight. Did you want anything else you wanted to say before we?
Well, I could summarize the discussion pretty quickly, but I won't. I think, this talk about this area, and Councilmember Teets talks about, and he's been a proponent of all the other areas, and I don't want it to get lost in a simple, quick presentation in a quick discussion around the table when we talk about Big Beaver, and we don't talk about all the others. There's a lot of activity going on, whether it's neighborhoods and other places. And the one thing that's not talked about, right, because we're focused on what it looks like, what it feels like, and if it's what we want, is the roads in this town. The roads are the front porch of every community, and Big Beaver is our front porch, whether you agree with it or not. But the roads are what people see, and when people want to sell their house, it's up to them to have their house up maintained, and it's up to us to have the street in good shape. So that's number one. Number two, At last year's retreat, which was our second year of doing the retreat, we had a large, long session on laying this facility out more customer service friendly, because when you stand at the door, there isn't one person who goes through here and knows where to go. So if you stand out there, I can direct traffic all day long. It's actually kind of fun to talk to people. But if you remember, we did have a long session on Friday night. And so we've kind of grown up as far as the retreat goes. And maybe you guys are talking about collaboration and working together and people knowing, you all knowing what's going on. February 26 and 27 is the retreat, 26 is at Kresge, 27 is at Walsh College. And so what it is it's department head level and city council, and we would bring in the planning commission and the DDA maybe to continue the discussion and be part of all that as sort of a kickoff to the year, because it's certainly, we use it to kick off the budget, right? So, and the strategy. So that's just one thing I would submit, Mayor, and then one of those sessions would be about this facility and many other areas of the community. That's
Yeah,
my
I
son.
think that's a great idea, and just my 2 cents, Brian. I think M59 dumps out on Rochester Road on the north end, and that's a gateway into the city also, and that's about as bad a road as you'll ever see anywhere. I know we're looking for a solution up there, but that's just my little 2 cents. There are other gateways into the city. Sterling Heights into the city, and from Birmingham into the city too. But there any other comments before we ask if there's anyone from the public that wishes to speak?
Yeah, I got one more comment.
Ed?
So I guess if, what Brian says, if the roads are the arteries for the city, then this area would be the heartbeat of the city. I mean, this area obviously is the center of all the attention, and so I agree with Don. If you're gonna do something out here, it's, you know, I saw the pictures that you were talking about with those towers on it, but it's gotta have a wow factor. I mean, you have to walk out that area and just be overwhelmed with it, because that's gonna, you know, it's gonna be, like I said, this is the heartbeat of the city. So, to that effect, I agree with Don, is you have to do something soon. You can't wait. I mean, we talked about it, to get something rolling, we want to do it sooner than later. The economy's good, you know, who knows how much longer that's going to last. So you want to do something while the iron is hot.
Yeah, and I think
Have
it's
to be bold.
Yeah,
You have to be bold.
You have to be bold. But I think one thing that I heard this evening from everyone is that we need to have some experts come in and talk to us as a joint. And Brian, if we could get somebody to come in here and talk about the Civic Center, what's feasible, what's not feasible, what legally can be done, what legally can't be done. It seemed to be kind of a little consensus here that we'd like to see some experts come in and give us some feedback as to some of the things that we can do.
I think that presentation just needs to be amped up a little bit that we had when we did, and can show more options. Though remember, we had it limited to the front option, and so we'll certainly work.
It's great to hear people from the outside come in here, though, like the Chicago
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
You know, to tell us that we should be taking advantage of this and some other things, so.
Dave, quickly. I was in a roundtable discussion here last week, and the cycle of life in Troy came up as one of the conversations. And as we get older, you know, I think Ellen brought it up, you know, we don't really have any place to move here in Troy if you want to downsize, so that becomes a very difficult situation. Yet we have these young kids that want to come to Troy to get their kids in school and engrossed in the community, and housing is not so inexpensive for them sometimes. So it would be nice to, again, as we envision that cycle of life, you know, it'd be nice to see the old people buy the young people's houses and just kind of churn over, like, you know, I don't know how we can facilitate that, but, you know, that cycle would be really nice to be able to develop and nurture.
I agree. I'd like to downsize, but it costs me more money to downsize than it is for me to stay where I'm at. Right. It's kind of a ridiculous situation, but yeah, it's just kind of crazy. Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak this evening? I think you're a mover and a shaker.
Yes, one of the younger ones. Well, I'm real pleased with this proactive session, and been some real good comments. You may recall, I spoke at council about 2 years ago and criticized the council for lack of being proactive, that say you were too reactive, and a lot of you got mad at me for that. But anyway, I'm glad to see that this is different. And some excellent comments. John had some good comments about the developers. At the Boomers and Shakers thing, developers were invited. One developer showed up, that's all. 80 Boomers and Shakers, one developer. So that idea, get some outside people in here, that's great. Karen and Jim Campbell talked about the Civic Center. A lot of us have talked about that. You know, James Savage used to talk about, that's the closest thing to a downtown area that we could have and stuff. So that's an excellent idea. I like what Doug said about, yeah, we got to emphasize Big Beaver, but hey, there's Maple, Rochester Road, and all this stuff. Let's talk about, you know, building up the entertainment down there in Maple, do something to improve the strip mall image of Rochester Road. Go back to this trolley idea, having a trolley running around Big Beaver and Maple Road and Rochester and what have you. Anyway, I think this is a great start, and continue on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. Anyone else wish to speak this evening? Kevin?
Milo?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Absolutely. I lived in Troy for 20 years, so I've been a city employee for 25. Where is downtown Troy? There isn't. Okay, you know, Romeo, Lake Orion, Oxford, they've all got a little, Royal Oak, Ferndale, they've all got a little area that they call downtown. And it's usually a bunch of little shops that, you know, people can walk around and do some shopping and that kind of thing. There's been an area there that's been, and Ed's probably not gonna like it much, but that whole property across the street from Pennington Collision there, that whole half a street is empty. You know, why couldn't somebody go in there and develop that into a downtown, you know? And you got, what's the sandwich place over there?
Hippos?
Yeah, Hippos, you know, that's kind of a start, but those kind of shops, you know, if those kind of shops were in there and then some small shops for, you know, people to come in and just walk up and down that street. We don't have that here. There's no walkabout area in Troy. I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Anyone else wish to speak this evening? I know we're going to meet again on the 23rd of November and, or the 9th. 9th.
The 9th.
9th and the 23rd. So we're going to be together. I think it's great that we're talking. So thank you for coming this evening, and we'll be adjourned. Thank you.